Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series, Great Expectations. Without further ado, returning to Great Expectations. But the vapor of a lime kiln would come between me and them, disordering them all, and it was through the vapor at last that I saw two men looking at me. "What do you want?" I asked, starting. "I don't know you." "Well, sir," returned one of them, bending down and touching me on the shoulder, "this is a matter that you'll soon arrange. I dare say, but you're arrested." "What is the debt?" £123 15 6. Jeweller's account, I think. "What is to be done?" "You had better come to my house," said the man. "I keep a very nice house." I made some attempt to get up and address myself. When I next attended to them, they were standing a little off from the bed and looking at me. I still lay there. "You see my state," said I. "I would come with you if I could, but indeed I am quite unable. If you take me from here, I think I shall die by the way." Perhaps they replied, or argued the point, or tried to encourage me to believe that I was better than I thought, for as much as they hang in my memory by only this one slender thread, I don't know what they did except that they forbore to remove me, that I had a fever and was avoided, that I suffered greatly, that I often lost my reason, that the time seemed interminable, that I confounded impossible existences with my own identity, that I was a brick in the house wall, and yet entreating to be released from the giddy place where the builders had set me, that I was a steel beam of a vast engine, clashing and whirling over a gulf, and yet that I implored in my own person to have the engine stopped, and my part in it hammered off, that I passed through these phases of disease. I know of my own remembrance, and did in some sort know at the time, that I sometimes struggled with real people, in the belief that they were murderers, and that I would all at once comprehend that they meant to do me good, and would then sink exhausted in their arms, and suffer them to lay me down. I also knew at the time, but above all, I knew there was a very constant tendency in all these people, who, when I was very ill, would present all kinds of extraordinary transformations of the human face, and would be much dilated in size. Above all, I say, I knew that there was an extraordinary tendency in all these people, sooner or later, to settle down into the likeness of Joe. After I had turned the worst point of my illness, I began to notice that while all its other features changed, this one consistent feature did not change. Whoever came about me still settled down into Joe. I opened my eyes in the night, and I saw in the great chair at the bedside Joe. I opened my eyes in the day, and, sitting on the window seat, smoking his pipe in the shaded open window, still I saw Joe. I asked for a cooling drink, and the dear hand that gave it me was Joe's. I sank back on my pillow after drinking, and the face that looked so hopefully and tenderly upon me was the face of Joe. At last, one day, I took courage and said, "Is it Joe?" And the dear old home voice answered, "Which it air, old chap." "Oh, Joe, you break my heart. Look angry at me, Joe. Strike me, Joe. Tell me of my ingratitude. Don't be so good to me." For Joe had actually laid his head down on the pillow at my side and put his arm round my neck in his joy that I knew him. "Which dear Pip, old chap," said Joe. "You and me was ever friends.
And when you're well enough to go out for a ride, what larks?
After which Joe withdrew to the window and stood with his back towards me, wiping his eyes. And as my extreme weakness prevented me from getting up and going to him, I lay there, penitently whispering,
Oh, God bless him. Oh, God bless this gentle Christian man.
Joe's eyes were red when I next found him beside me, but I was holding his hand, and we both felt happy.
How long, dear Joe? Which you mean to say, Pip? How long have your illness lasted, dear old chap? Yes, Joe. It's the end of May, Pip. Tomorrow is the 1st of June. And have you been here all that time, dear Joe? Pretty nigh, old chap. For as I says to Biddy, when the news of your being ill were brought by letter, which it were brought by the post, and being formerly single, he is now married, though underpaid for a deal of walking and shoe leather. But wealth were not a object on his part, and marriage were the great wish of his heart. It is so delightful to hear you, Joe. But I interrupt you in what you said to Biddy, which it were, said Joe, that how you might be amongst strangers, and that how you and me, having been ever friends, a visit at such a moment might not prove unacceptable. And Biddy, her word were, go to him, without loss of time. That,
said Joe, summing up with his judicial air,
were the word of Biddy. Go to him, Biddy say, without loss of time. In short, I shouldn't greatly deceive you,
Joe added, after a little grave reflection,
if I represented to you that the word of that young woman were, without a minute's loss of time.
There Joe cut himself short, and informed me that I was to be talked to in great moderation, and that I was to take a little nourishment at stated frequent times, whether I felt inclined for it or not, and that I was to submit myself to all his orders. So I kissed his hand, and lay quiet, while he proceeded to indite a note to Biddy with my love in it. Evidently Biddy had taught Joe to write. As I lay in bed looking at him, it made me, in my weak state, cry again, with pleasure to see the pride with which he set about his letter. My bedstead, divested of its curtains, had been removed, with me upon it, into the sitting room, as the airiest and largest, and the carpet had been taken away, and the room kept always fresh and wholesome night and day. At my own writing table pushed into a corner and cumbered with little bottles. Joe now sat down to his great work, first choosing a pen from the pen tray as if it were a chest of large tools, and tucking up his sleeves as if he were going to wield a crowbar or sledgehammer. It was necessary for Joe to get hold on heavily to the table with his left elbow, and to get his right leg well out behind him before he could begin. And when he did begin, he made every downstroke so slowly that it might have been 6 feet long, while at every upstroke I could hear his pen spluttering extensively. He had a curious idea that the inkstand was on the side of him where it was not, and constantly dipped his pen into space, and seemed quite satisfied with the result. Occasionally he was tripped up by some orthographical stumbling block, but on the whole he got on very well indeed, and when he had signed his name and had removed a finishing blot from the paper to the crown of his head with his 2 forefingers, he got up and hovered about the table, trying the effect of his performance from various points of view as it lay there, with unbounded satisfaction. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.